Hello and welcome to this channel. This is another video going through the King James's Bible. Today I'm in the book of Kings part 2, working through chapters 19, 20 and 21. So let's get started with our first chapter. So in chapter 19 we learn that King Hezekiah, who is the king of Judah right now, he's just learned the news that the king of Assyria had sent some officials and they've been mocking him and trying to coax his people into coming their way. So he then decides to go to God in his temple and pray. And then he sends two of his men, some priests, to go and see the prophet Isaiah. Now they ask this prophet to pray on their behalf to God to ask him to save them from the Assyrian people. And God speaks through this prophet and tells them not to worry, that he's going to send a spirit to the king of Assyria and that will return him back home. Next we learn that the king of Assyria learns that the king of Ethiopia wants to attack him. But obviously this does not stop him going after the Judah tribe. It's more like that was a diversion and he's seen it. He's like, look, your God of Israel is not going to defeat me. I've already won the northern tribe of Israel and I'm coming after Judah next too. So King Hezekiah, he then goes back to God and prays. But the God of Israel knows everything. He knows what's going on with the king of Assyria and he is not worried at all. He is mad, angry that he has tried to go against him, and so he is raging to send him right back from where he came. And God promises them that the Judah tribe will be fine, they're going to have plenty food, and that the king of Assyria will not be able to touch them at all, that they're going to be safe for a few years. And just as God said, late at night, an angel is sent by God that kills 185,000 of the Assyrian army. And when the Judah tribe in Jerusalem wake up, they see all of these dead bodies around them. So this obviously sends the king of Assyria back home, and his sons, we learn, conspire against him and assassinate him. And that basically is the end of King Assyria and the end of chapter 19. Now as we open chapter 20, we learn that the king Hezekiah becomes really sick. And the same prophet Isaiah visits him and lets him know that this is the illness that will basically end his life. Now the king cries and prays to God, please look at what I've done. I've been faithful to you. Please don't let me die right now. So God listens and he gives him 15 more years added to his life. And he assures him that the Assyrians will be kept away from him during this time. And God tells the king that on the third day that he will return to his temple. And the prophet Isaiah sees that he has a boil, the king, that is becoming quite infectious, so he gets his servants to cover it with figs. And King Hezekiah asks the prophet, when will I get a sign? What's the sign going to be to know that I'm going to be healed? And his prophet is looking at this sundial and he's seeing that the shadow on it is going backwards instead of forwards. And he's like, is this normal? And King Isaiah says, no, that is not normal. So there's his sign. So once the king is healed, he's paid a visit from the officials of King Babylon. Now he sends them because he's heard he's been ill and he decides to send them over with gifts. Now when King Hezekiah sees them, he is like, all right, come on, I'll show you all my riches, kind of boasting, showing him around all of the palace, all the riches, his spices, and all of these things, and they're so impressed. And then his prophet Isaiah says to him, who were those men and where did they come from? And the king tells him that he showed them everything around the palace and showed him that he's boasted. And the prophet says that now that he's done this, basically it means God is saying through him that he's going to lose all of it. Not him during his time, but afterwards. All of this will be taken away by Babylon. Plus his descendants will all be taken away there too. And King Hezekiah is kind of fine with this. He's like, well, if that's what God wants, then so be it, because I won't be here, I'll be dead. And then we see King Hezekiah dies and his son takes over, Manasseh. So he is the new king of Judah, and we now close chapter 20 and open chapter 21 to find out what his reign is all about. Now Manasseh is only 12 when he becomes king, but he reigned for a total of 55 years. Now Manasseh is one of the most evilest kings. He basically ignores what his father had done. He'd got rid of all those high places. Well, he replaces them all, builds them all back up again. He starts making false gods, worshipping Baal, the pagan god, making another pole, that pole for the goddess of the tree goddess, making that and actually putting that inside of the temple of God. He went so far as to sacrifice one of his sons, and he also gets involved with mediums and spiritualists. So he has gone way, way further away from God than any of his predecessors. So he's leading all of the people down this path too. And so God tells the prophets to let the Israelites know that for all of their sinning and for following the way of Manasseh, that they will all be punished. And he says that basically Manasseh has done worse than the Amorites. Manasseh is basically like King Ahab. He was one of the most evilest kings as well, so he's pretty much on par, if not worse, than him. So God is going to basically cleanse the land that they're on. It's his promised land. It will be cleansed. Anybody left will go into exile and right into the hands of their enemies. God is basically sick and tired. Since he's got the Israelites out of Egypt all those years ago, they have constantly gone off path and sinned, so he is pretty fed up with them. We then learn that Manasseh eventually dies and he is buried in the palace's garden. His son Amon then becomes king at age 22, and he only reigns for 2 years, and he is just as evil as his father. Now the officials around this King Amon conspire against him and they have him assassinated. He is then buried in his tomb in Uzzah. Now the people themselves kill everybody that went and conspired to kill King Amon. So they're all wiped out, and then the next king in his place is Joshua. So he then becomes the king of Judah, and we close this chapter after this bloodbath. So we've covered 3 kings. King Hezekiah, who was pretty faithful really overall to the Lord. Then his son Manasseh just turns pure evil and has gone in a total demise. His son after that, again 2 years, but then he's killed. The people aren't learning, it's just killing, sinning. And we are left now with a new king to move on into the next chapters. So we will see what becomes of him. So thanks for your time, thanks for being here. I'll be back again soon with more chapters within the book of Kings 2. Bye now.